It's May 5th here on the PHLY Eagles Show, brought to you by TrueMark Financial Credit Union. That means Cinco de Mayo. Happy Cinco de Mayo to everyone watching at home, and especially to Jamie Lynch here with us on the PHLY Eagles Show, someone who appreciates Cinco de Mayo. Jamie, how are you?
I'm doing well, Zach. I went to a little derby party Saturday night, so I don't think I'll be enjoying that type of side of Cinco de Mayo today. But yes, happy Cinco de Mayo to all out there.
What better way to celebrate it than talking about depth charts, right?
I woke up excited to talk depth charts.
I was literally, this is no joke. I was literally in bed in the middle of the night thinking about this because, we discussed the defensive depth charts last week. We discussed, you and Rich had a great show on Friday. I joined in. There was so much going on. We briefly went over the offensive depth charts there. So I wanted to return to it at the start of this week, but with a different spin. And that's the think back to May 5th, this time last year, when, you looked at the Eagles depth chart. And at that time, you didn't know Zack Baun was going to be an all-pro linebacker. You didn't know Mekhi Becton was going to be a guard. You didn't know, frankly, Bryce Huff was going to be a non-factor as an edge rusher, right? So as we analyzed the depth charts last week, it's always a helpful exercise to consider the 2024 team that goes on and wins the Super Bowl, and the 2025 team. See where the strengths and weaknesses are. Perhaps identify some of these breakout players, someone who could be Zack Baun for this year, and to see where maybe we had concerns a year ago. And then you look at it now, and it's like, why were we even concerned about that, right? If we had what the crystal ball would show. So that's the premise for this. But then we have a lot of other fun topics to discuss throughout the show. So let's get right into it.
It's funny you mentioned that, Zach, because if you had asked me this last year, who was more likely to be an All-Pro, Zack Baun or Bryce Huff, I almost 100% would have said Bryce Huff.
100%. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, frankly, Zack Baun, at that time, you would have said Devin White was going to be the starter. As linebacker, right? And in positions where you said, all right, there's going to be a competition here, there really wasn't much of a competition. And positions where maybe there was a relative weakness, might have looked a little better going into the season. So that's why this is interesting to look at here. So we'll start with the quarterbacks. The big change here, of course, is that going into this year, you have Joy is telling me to tilt the computer down. I'm sorry about that. You have Jalen Hurts. I've heard of him. You have Tanner McKee, and then you have a competition here between Kyle McCord and DTR. Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Okay. Last year you had Kenny Pickett as the backup, and you had Tanner McKee as the third quarterback. So going into it, which one are you more comfortable with? Are you more comfortable with last year's group when you had that backup quarterback with legit starting experience, which Kenny Pickett had, or this year where you have probably more promise from Tanner McKee, and then more, you have the intriguing rookie in Kyle McCord?
I've always been a little bit of a Kenny Pickett doubter throughout his career. I mean, I affectionately called him doll hands back in my previous career. Yeah, I mean, a quarterback that has to wear gloves, I'm sorry, I don't have confidence in. You know what I mean? So, McKee, I'm not Bo. McKee wasn't my end-all, be-all. I always thought he was intriguing, had the height, the size, a little bit of the arm, and the decision-making ability to be a good backup. But now you've kind of seen it, so you feel better about that. So I would take Tanner McKee as a true backup this year over Kenny Pickett. Pickett had the experience, but, I'm going to roll with Tanner McKee as the better backup option. And then if you look at the third string, Kyle McCord is in, similar-ish territory to what Tanner McKee was last year. An unknown kid with the size, the intangibles, the arm, a lot of the things you like in a developmental quarterback. So that's similar footing. So it basically comes down to McKee versus Pickett for me. And I give a slight edge to Tanner McKee there.
How do you feel about Jalen Hurts going into this season relative to last season?
I mean, so much better. Last year I've had such a weird roller coaster ride with Jalen Hurts. I loved the draft pick when they made it. I thought he showed so much promise. And then at one point I was like, I don't think this guy has what it takes. And then obviously he had everything and more of what it takes. So definitely feel 1,000% better about Jalen Hurts entering this season than I did last year.
Yeah, I think you framed it well. Top of the depth chart, Jalen, with the way he obviously finished last year, being the Super Bowl MVP, fewer questions than there were a year ago. And I think there's room to build off of last year as well. And then obviously with the backups, I thought Kenny Pickett presented just more reliability, but there's more upside with Tanner McKee. And I think what you saw in the preseason last year, in training camp too, then week 16 and week 17 showed enough there that I thought they made the right thing trading Pickett going into this year with McKee. And I like the upside of McCord. We're going to get to it a little later, but the Eagles showed some behind the scenes footage from their passion meeting. That's what they call it, the passion meeting on the Saturday morning of the draft. And you heard Dave Caldwell, former Jaguars GM, now senior executive with the Eagles, really stump for Kyle McCord. You heard the analytics group, a Zach Drapkin stump for Kyle McCord. So there's things I like about McCord. DTR is intriguing as competition there. I'm not expecting him to make the 53. So then let's
I think that's right. I think Kyle McCord definitely has the advantage there because he's cheap, he's young, and he's a guy you can develop in your own system for years to come. So
and
not that DTR isn't, but you invested draft capital in Kyle McCord.
And he gives Anthony endless material. So, I don't think the Anthony Gargano show, which you can watch every day from 9 to 11, will be any more excited than the days after the preseason games when Kyle McCord gets in there and throws 10 for 12 and just looks awesome, right? It's gonna lead the show.
Oh, on a selfish level, as a PCL alum, it was tough to see Abdul go to the Giants and we end up with the prep guy. So selfishly, that's a little hurdle for me to get over, but I see why they did.
Yeah, there's gonna be prep guys every year. So let's go to running back, where there's not a prep guy, but there is someone who went to a prep school in New England, and that's AJ Dillon. He's the big change here. So last year's running back group, Saquon Barkley, Kenny Gainwell, Will Shipley, turned out to be the three that the top three there. There were other guys that they had, and this year your top three looks like Saquon Barkley, AJ Dillon, Will Shipley. I would probably put Shipley before Dillon. And then you have, Montrell Johnson. You have Bo Wolf's favorite, Lou Nichols, trying to make the but really, you're looking at the big change here being Dillon for Gainwell. Obviously, what we know about Saquon this year relative to last year, and then Will Shipley going into year 2 compared to year 1. How do you feel about the running back depth chart?
I think it's worse. With the caveat that Will Shipley can grow into a better role. But I think, AJ Dillon, we haven't seen in a year and a half on a football field. He's kind of lucky to be playing again. Love the if he's ideally what he is, I love the thunder and lightning aspect there with the big beefy running back and Saquon. But Kenny Gainwell is a more proven running back there. So I think the running back depth chart actually got worse, with the capability that Will Shipley can change that. Can he be a Kenny Gainwell type? You saw in a small sample size last year, he did okay with his opportunities. And I think you've talked about it before, how much they like him internally. You think he's the running back too. But I think on paper here, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, last year's running back room probably a little bit better on paper than this one.
Yeah, I think Bo would probably agree with you if you were on the show. I'm going to disagree with you because I like Shipley. And I think Shipley, I'm more optimistic about Shipley going into this season than I was Gainwell going into last season. And Gainwell had his believers, Nick Sirianni among them. AJ Dillon, you're absolutely right. It's a lottery ticket. Hasn't played in a year and a half. But what I like about AJ Dillon is that he provides something different, right?
Yeah.
Than Shipley does. So there's some diversity of skill set in the backfield that I like. Now Saquon, I thought Saquon was going to have a huge year last year. Like that's not really makes me
yeah.
prognosticate.
Way to go out on a limb.
Yeah, I'm a little. I don't want to say concerned. That's not the term I would use, but I think expectations need to be tempered relative to the way he played last year, just because of the amount of carries that he had. Number one, the workload. But also, he was remarkably healthy, and time just history shows that it's hard to count on a running back being healthy like that back-to-back years.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he had arguably the greatest running back season of all time. It's not going to go up, right? Like we probably saw the ceiling of what we got from Saquon Barkley, both in terms of health, in terms of workload, in terms of production. So that can't possibly get better. It can, unfortunately, only get worse. But his worse is probably still better than 95% of the running backs in the NFL.
Well said. And yeah, so I see in the chat, and please leave your chats, comments.
Let's get that thumbs up button working here too. Come on.
Exactly. No mention of Bo's son, Lou Nichols. I mentioned Lou Nichols. If AJ Dillon doesn't make the team, and I should mention I'm Ty Davis Price, someone who I had been relatively high on as like a down the depth chart guy. He was cut this weekend. So the Eagles are making room for undrafted rookies. And so he was kind of the odd man out there. They have Montrell Johnson, but Lou Nichols could factor into that RB3 mix if A.J. Dillon just doesn't look right. While we talk about running backs, though, we should mention fullback, because this time last year we were not talking fullback.
Yeah.
This year on the roster, Ben Van Sumeren is listed as a fullback. And why is this noteworthy today? Well, Jeffrey Lurie, Eagles owner, went on WIP this morning for Brent. They're doing a Brandon Graham day there. Shout out to Brandon. And he mentioned in conversation with John Ritchie, I should say, a former fullback for the Eagles. So that's how it's
playing to the crowd.
Exactly. That the Eagles are going to quietly try to resurrect the fullback position. They had Kevin Turner, they had John Ritchie. He said they'll see what Ben Van Sumeren could do.
Don't leave Cecil Martin out of that discussion.
Yeah, I'm just quoting Jeffrey here, but yeah, you can throw Cecil Martin. You can, I mean Leonard Weaver for one season.
Oh yeah,
the fullback that they had. But if we just took away, let's play with this for a moment, and
sure.
I think that Jeffrey was being personable with John Ritchie here. I don't think the Eagles have these grand plans for fullback, but suppose they do. What do you make of how they can use fullback in the offense in 2025?
Well, see, I sent you the article because I read the words. You heard the words, so you're more apt to talk about, him playing to John Ritchie a little bit there. But it does seem like there's a little bit of the trend. Obviously Kyle Shanahan, but Baltimore and Dallas also got behind the fullback kind of revolution a little bit as well. And you saw the Eagles tinkering with it with Van Sumeren. His athleticism, I think, intrigues them a little bit. And then you bring in Ty from Nebraska, who lined up at fullback, I think 8 times during his time with the Cornhuskers, all of which were like goal line pushes. And my first thought was, are they preparing for the tush push to be banned? If the tush push is banned, which they would know better than I, which is going to be coming up again for discussion in the very near future. Yeah. Are they looking for that next wrinkle of those short yardage situations? That was my first thought that came up when I heard him say that.
Yeah, I think that's good thinking, Jamie, because I am expecting the tush push or the push play, as the NFL likes to call it. I'm expecting that to be modified, and so there's going to be no pushing allowed. Now, I think what you'll see is just the traditional quarterback sneak, and I would expect the Eagles to convert that at a high rate. I don't think it would go to like a nigh formation, if you will. But to your point, I do think that they are sincere about Ben Van Sumeren playing fullback. And Ben Van Sumeren, you're absolutely right, really good athlete. Someone, he was more of a converted linebacker than he was converted full. Like he played running back at one point in college, switches to linebacker. So is a good athlete. Someone in the chat asked about his hands. I've seen it. Can catch the ball. He's coming off ACL injury, but yeah, he is going to be a fullback. He's listed on the roster as a fullback. So I just don't think this is going to be used at the rate of John Ritchie or Cecil Martin or Leonard Weaver. I think it's going to be matchup dependent, formation dependent. So we will we'll see there. I don't think it's necessarily I don't think it's because of the tush push, but I think it's more just trying to diversify and evolve the offense. I do know one thing that Nick Sirianni really wants to do this year relative to 2 years ago is add more wrinkles to this offense, not just master what they did, but try to bring it to, try to evolve it, not just do the same things. And so one of the different looks they can do is to have more two back formation. So yeah, it's definitely worth mentioning Van Summer in here. I'm just not running with the idea that they're going to be a fullback offense per se.
Yeah, and then the other thought I had off of it outside of the tush push was just maybe that, Dallas Goedert is gone and Grant Calcaterra not nearly as good of a run game blocker as Dallas is. Dallas is elite. So in particular running down situations, do they want to get that fullback in the fold a little bit more for some better run game blocking? That's another part of this that came to my mind. We'll see what happens, whether it be, A.J. Dillon in that fullback role with a 2 running back / fullback kind of set up there, or if Van Sumeren gets just more snaps than he did last year.
So actually, let's stay on the idea of the tight end here, right? And we'll get the wide receiver after tight end. You brought it up, and I think this is really a sweet spot discussion when you're talking about the offensive depth chart. Okay, tight ends this year, you're looking at Dallas Goedert as of now, Grant Calcaterra, Harrison Bryant, Kylan Granson, E.J. Jenkins, Cameron Latu, and Nick Muse. A year ago, you were looking at Dallas Goedert, C.J. Uzomah, Grant Calcaterra, Albert O, pushing for a roster spot. They had an undrafted rookie who ended up getting injured. But so it's a different type of situation here, mainly because of the uncertainty surrounding Dallas Goedert. We talk about this every show, and I'm still expecting Dallas Goedert to play elsewhere next year. I still think Dallas Goedert's best football situation's in Philadelphia, and as days go on here, I think it should become clear to now. I don't know what the money. It's going to come down to money. It's going to come down to if Dallas Goedert can get more cash somewhere else than he can with the Eagles, because the Eagles are not prepared to pay him $14 million this season, and Dallas Goedert will have to decide is there a number closer to what the Eagles want where he'd play here, or is it better going somewhere else? But if I'll say if Goddard's back, I like this depth chart this year because I think Harrison Bryant has some upside. Calcaterra showed something last year. I would like a young developmental tight end more than they have. They obviously didn't address that in the draft,
which shocked me.
Yeah, but if they don't keep Goedert, this is a concern. This is a major concern for me.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. You're going from, I don't know, when he plays, because health is a big caveat with him. He's a top 6 or 7 tight end at worst, most likely. Very good blocker, good yak, has that explosive kind of touchdown capabilities, which we saw in the playoffs. I mean, that's up there with one of the biggest plays of the playoffs. Sure. So to lose him, you're going to be worse. There's just no denying that. Whether you bring in a Michael Mayer, like you've talked about from the Raiders, or somebody like that, that's obviously to be determined. I'm with you. I wish they could work out a situation here because I do think Dallas Goedert could maybe make himself some more money down the line if they could figure out some kind of 1-year deal, maybe a 2-year deal, but it seems more and more unlikely. So it does appear like the tight end room is going to be worse on the depth chart.
Yeah, I would say Howie is not ignorant to this, right? Like he recognizes that if Goedert goes, this is a spot they're going to have to continue to look at. I think internally they're more optimistic in Calcaterra than maybe the fan base is. They won without Goedert last year, right? Now they didn't lose a lot last year, but the offense functioned decently without Goedert last year. There is a big drop off from a run blocking perspective, and that's something that needs to be considered. But I think they believe their offense can function. I do think though that if Goddard's not here, they add to this position. And I would
think so, right? You have to.
And I think they have some ideas in mind too. And there's going to be, Howie has picks the trade, and he'll be aggressive. You saw they acquired Jahan Dotson during camp last year. So they have some opportunity to do it. They have the resources to do it. It's just a matter of other teams kind of seeing how their depth charts develop. Like, one thing I'll say is in Cleveland, let's say they go complete youth movement and they're willing to move on from David Njoku. They drafted Harold
Who's
Fannin.
one of Stefanski's favorite players on the roster.
Yeah. And
he
look,
loves Njoku.
If they're trying to win this year, if they're starting Flacco and Njoku had a great combination. So that wouldn't be an option. But I'm just throwing that out there. And if you look at teams that drafted tight ends early, there were 5 tight ends drafted in the first 70 picks of the draft. Harold Fannin being one of them. So if they want to move Fannin up that depth chart, it's definitely something to watch. Like that. Those are the types of situations that the Eagles should look at. I still think Michael Mayer makes a lot of sense, but Howie's not going to be sitting on his hands in this situation. And then as far as them not taking a tight end, I thought Harold Fannin made sense if they had it, at 64, if they traded back a few spots. There was an earlier run on tight ends, like Terrence Ferguson went earlier than some thought. I didn't think there was any pick on day 3 that really compelled them to do it. And frankly, I think it's a sign of good process when you don't just force the position because of need. The reality is, if they took a 5th round tight end, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. And like that player is really going to move the needle on the depth chart.
Yeah. And in your opinion, Zach, how much does the George Kittle extension in San Fran kind of change this market? Like, what do you expect from Goddard's camp now and the Eagles vice versa in that with the new, contract set?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's George Kittle. It's Trey McBride. You've seen the tight end market move during the past month. And so I'm not saying Goddard's going to make that, but
he's going to want that.
It raises all boats, so to speak, right? And so at that point, you look at it. I think Goddard's probably a $16 million a year player. The Eagles don't want to pay him 14. So if you're saying, all right, Goddard, play for 8, then it's like, wait, that's 50% of what my market value might be. Now, is there a team out there that's going to pay him $16 million? I don't know if that's the case. But I do know that it's the Eagles really need to convince him that there's not another team that's going to pay him if he's going to take that type of pay cut. Now, I mentioned Jahan Dotson, and after this break, we're going to talk about the big difference between the wide receiver core this year and the wide receiver core last year. So stick around. I want to talk about Empire today. I always enjoy discussing Empire today because just like your favorite team needs a home court or home field or home ice advantage, you're seeing that in the playoffs in the NBA and the NHL, your home needs a home floor advantage. And the place that can provide it to you and for you is Empire Today. They can help you get what you need. Empire Today has flooring experts, dedicated flooring professionals who focus on flooring every single day. We've all been to these big box stores. I know I go aisle to aisle, and I have no idea what I'm looking at. I'm trying to act like I do. I'm looking, I'm picking this material out. Then I get home, and I'm like, I can't install this myself. I need to find an installer. I need to coordinate things. Look, Empire Today makes it easy for you, okay? They are the best bet for new floors. They live and breathe flooring. They'll be with you every step of the way. It's a whole different ball game. Their flooring experts bring the showroom right to your home. You pick the right flooring and the right colors for your space. You see how it looks with your furniture in your home. Think about that convenience. With Empire Today, you get clear upfront and all-inclusive pricing, plus you schedule installation as soon as the next day. Schedule a free in-home estimate today because some things are just better at home. PHLY listeners can receive a $350 discount when using promo code PHLY. Yes, you heard that correctly. A $350 discount with code PHLY. Restrictions apply. Visit Empire Today/PHLY for full details.
And let me tell you about a delicious new light beer that has hit down in the market, and that's Pabst Light. Pabst Light is a new, light, modern beer from Pabst Brewing Company, and it's only 96 calories. Look, it's about to be beach and pool season. You don't want those heavy beers dragging you down a little bit, giving you that bloated gut. So you get a nice, crisp, refreshing, 96 calorie, 3.5 gram carb, crisp, refreshing flavor from Pabst Light. They use high quality ingredients so you can get that high quality beer at a smart, approachable price. And it retains the fun and independent spirit that Pabst is known for, but it's light. So to learn more about the new Pabst Light, visit PabstLight.com. And please drink responsibly. Must be 21 and older.
If you're looking for a good time, by the way, I want to tell everyone about June 14th. It's coming up quickly.
Oh,
the second annual PHLY Liberty Open. I'm driving by all these signs for a big golf tournament in the area this weekend. And I'm like, the golf tournament that matters in this area is the PHLY Liberty Open. The 2 p.m.
You think we can get Scotty Scheffler out there? Maybe Rory wants to come by?
Yeah, well, you know what? I keep hearing about the cricket club. The place to go is Valley Brook Country Club, right? The shotgun start at 2 p.m. And by the way, shotgun start means everyone starts at the same time. Okay. I have learned that in the past week. But that's among the exciting events we have here.
Can I ask before you learned what it was, what did you think it was?
Yeah, good question, Jamie. I wasn't sure. And so I'm reading the script or not the script, but the graphic, and I'm like, the shotgun start. And I'm like, wait, what does that mean? The shotgun start. And then I think I was on with Fran, and Fran said everyone starts at the same time. And I said, all right, that makes a lot of sense.
Did you think it was like a 21 gun salute at the beginning? Like
I didn't know what it meant, but I feel like if I misspeak on this show, then Bo brings it up every day for the next X amount of years. So I read shotgun start, and I'm like, oh no, did I say something that I shouldn't say? So yeah, shotgun start means everyone starts at the same time. Okay,
that's great.
You can tell I know very little about golf, but I know it's gonna be a fun event on June 14th. And by the way, we have a lot of fun events here at PHLY, including I think our Flyers guys are having fun tonight with the draft lottery. I am curious your view, because look, the NBA draft lottery is next week, the NHL draft lottery tonight.
We need some good luck.
Yeah, would you want the NFL to have a draft lottery, or do you like it that the worst team makes it?
I go back and forth on this all the time. I think I like what the NFL does, but I do like the randomness of, like, if you're in the top 5, you got a shot. It does, but I feel like the NFL is the least tankable sport in a way. So, like, I don't mind it, but I am intrigued. Like, say the top 5 worst teams, had a tier of getting the top pick. I wouldn't hate it. I don't think.
I like lotteries just for the randomness.
It's an event.
Yeah, I agree. It is harder to tank in the NFL. Although I do need to say in recent years that there's been this phenomenon of the coach who knows he's getting fired, who wins the final year and screws his, I think Mayo did it last year with the Patriots. Lovie Smith did it 2 years ago with the Texans, right? And there's always, like, the difference between the number 1 and the number 2 spot is huge. And so it's always,
I feel like the Giants have been doing that for like the past 3 years. Like, they're always winning one late. That's like, why did you win that?
Yeah, Tommy DeVito screws them out of a quarterback. But if you watched that Eagles-Giants game, by the way, to end the season this year, Week 18, you saw Jahan Dotson on the field. How about that transition?
Wow, this guy's a pro, ladies and gentlemen.
And I bring that up because Jahan Dotson really is the big difference here. When we talked about the Eagles depth chart at wide receiver a year ago, our big question was, who's the wide receiver 3? They had A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, entrenched as the top 2. Then it was Parris Campbell, Nia Smith, Johnny Wilson, Britton Covey, right? There was kind of this group of receivers in the middle. This year, you look at it, Jahan Dotson, the Eagles gave up draft inventory for him last year, came on, had that big game in Week 18, obviously played well in the Super Bowl, played well in the postseason. So Jahan Dotson's the number 3 receiver here. After that, Johnny Wilson and Nia Smith are back. They have Terrace Marshall, former second-round pick, who they signed. There's a handful of undrafted rookies in camp. So it's kind of a big group of players in there. But do you feel that Jahan Dotson's presence gives you more comfort in this spot? Do you think the Eagles need to continue to improve that wide receiver position?
I could be wrong here, but I do feel like Jahan Dotson got thrown in late last year, a little bit of a learning curve. So I expect a better Jahan Dotson this year. I think that's a fair kind of assumption to make. And then, look, you got a bunch of young guys. I'm a sucker for LSU back with that squad. So like part of me is like, all right, they're gonna make Marshall really, really pop here. You would like to see Smith or Wilson kind of take it and run and earn a spot. But I think they have a good mix of, like, when you have Smith and Brown, you're set. Dotson should be better. And then you have competition for that fourth spot. And I think they have some youth here that can give you a good competition. And hopefully somebody earns the right, and it's an easy decision to make. But it's hard not to feel pretty good about the wide receiver room.
Yeah, it's a good point. And the thing we can't take for granted here is the top of the depth chart might be the best in the NFL. Them, Cincinnati, or Miami. Those are the three teams in conversation for best duos in the NFL. And I think AJ and Devontae are prime of their careers, will continue to get better. Congratulations, AJ Brown, by the way, on getting engaged.
What an engagement, Zach.
Seriously, John Legend coming in for that. That's a legendary.
You didn't have John Legend at your proposal?
I did not have John. I didn't even have John Legend music. I probably should have had music. Yeah.
Where did you propose? Is it too much information? I'll tell you my story if you want to share yours.
I proposed on a porch down the shore. There's a whole backstory.
Nice.
I proposed on a porch down the shore. Yeah.
Nice. I was in Valley Green.
Nice.
I was going to go to Europe and do it, but I got really nervous about 2 weeks prior to traveling with the ring. And I had like TSA visions in my head that they were going to be like, "Sir, your metal detector went off. What's that?" And because I wanted to have it on me. So I pivoted, made sure. So walking Valley Green, Addie is very much a don't want anybody around, private moment type of person. So I had to wait for everybody to like stop walking. So we just kept walking and walking and walking, and everybody kept like being around. So I had to strike as soon as nobody was around. But it was good.
I'd be nervous about the woman saying no, and then you spend the rest of your European vacation.
That would suck. Yeah, I guess I'll go to a hostel. See ya.
But AJ Brown, by the way, gets engaged. She did not say no. She said yes. Congratulations, AJ Brown. And I think Jahan Dotson is better than I felt about Parris Campbell last year. Although I did like definitely Parris Campbell. Britton Covey, who's not going to be back, he said farewell on Instagram this week. The Eagles are counting on Anaya Smith to show them more than he did last year. Johnny Wilson looked better in camp than he did during the season. So I know they have intriguing down the depth chart players, but I still think 4 and 5 here can be upgraded if there's a waiver wire situation or a player gets cut late in camp. I don't think those guys are guaranteed to be on the team. But I think for number 3 receivers, Jahan Dotson is more promising than most teams have, and I do expect the Eagles to utilize him more this year than they did 1 year ago.
Yeah, I agree with that. Do you think either of those, whether it be Wilson, Smith, Marshall, you think any of them have a chance to be Bo's camp crush this year or no?
So I think Wilson and Smith probably graduated from it, and Marshall is definitely not Bo's type, right? Yeah. If a viewer's ever heard of the player before, then he can't be camp.
He's out.
Bo needs someone that's so esoteric that you need. He's a trained football eye. He's an astute camp observer. Okay, so his ability to ascertain the player's worthiness in camp. Terrace Marshall Jr. was a 2nd-round pick who played for the national champions. That's way too trendy. That's like going to the restaurant that everyone tells you to go to, right?
So a hipster when it comes to his camp crushes. Like,
100%. Like, frankly, him and Fran stand there during practice, and it's like no one else can watch practice the way we do, right? But honestly, if you want to know where Bo's camp crush usually is, look at the offensive line. Okay, so the offensive line Last
Look at
year,
that transition.
I'm trying here.
You're a pro.
Last year, you had Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Tyler Steen, Lane Johnson, Mekhi Becton, Fred Johnson, Matt Hennessy, Trevor Keegan, Dylan McMahon, Darian Kennard, among others. And at this time last year, Mekhi Becton was thought to be your swing tackle, and the guard, Tyler Steen was the front runner to be guard. That changed quickly in the camp, of course. This year, you got Mailata, Dickerson, Jurgens, Johnson back. But right guard remains a question. It's between Steen and Kenyon Green. The Eagles also have Trevor Keegan. They have Drew Kendall, their 5th-round pick. They have Miles Hinton, their 6th-round a 6th-round pick. Cameron Williams in there as well. They have Kendall Lamb, a veteran swing tackle. Darren Kennard's back. Brett Toth, Lakin Vakalani, Holland Pierce. So I'll jump in here. I actually like their options more this year in terms of the depth. I think Mekhi Becton was more intriguing than anyone they have outside of their top 5 this year. Although if you consider Kenyon Green like this year's version of Mekhi Becton, the 1st-round pick you're building up, I can certainly get behind that. And I know you and Rich talked about it, but you think Kenyon Green's going to beat out Tyler Steen?
I don't. I think that's going to be a really good – I think that's the biggest camp battle that's going to happen. Tyler Steen, if he can't take it entering year 3, I feel like that says a lot about what they think about Steen. Obviously, Kenyon Green, some high, draft pedigree behind him. So I think they're going to give him every chance to win the job. I think they like that size. We'll see how much Stoutland University here can change a man. It's just a year ago where I wouldn't have thought Mekhi Becton could have been what he ended up becoming. So the Eagles have a lot of credit on their side in their building of how they develop these guys. And it doesn't hurt playing next to Jurgens and Lane Johnson, right? So I think Kenyon Green, if he is going to resurrect himself, this is the perfect opportunity to do so. We'll see. You'd like Tyler Steen to win it entering year 3. And what's your thought on Drew Kendall? Is there guard capability there, or do you think he's strictly going to be a center backup? Because if he's in the mix, I know Baldy is incredibly high on Kendall. So it could be a great camp battle.
Yeah, I think Kendall's going to stay at center, and I think that the guard flexibility is more valuable if he's active on game day, right? You want someone who can play multiple spots, and it's probably better to have a center who can bounce the guard than a guard who can snap. So I like that. I like Kendall in that role. I'm with you. I'm intrigued by Kenyon Green. I look at it. Tyler Steen's had 2 years to win that job already. He could have beat out Jurgens 2 years ago, didn't do it. Certainly could have beat out Becton last year, could have done it. Now, players take time to develop sometimes, and development's not all linear. And I've spoken to some of the veteran offensive linemen who really like the way Steen's developing. And he is bigger and longer, right? There's that jump set. Like, he's a tackle that moved the guard, whereas Kenyon Green's more of the natural guard. But I'm real intrigued by Green. And I like the fact that they have more options at like depth tackle this year. Miles Hinton, and we'll get to it when we talk about the
I was going to say he was one of the things that stood out to me about that video was how pumped they were about Miles Hinton.
Yeah, they really like Miles Hinton. I'm curious to see if Cameron Williams plays guard. He played tackle the other day. I don't think both those guys make the team coming out of camp, right? So one will probably be on practice squad or IR stashed. We'll see about Trevor Keegan, friend of the show, came on around this time last year. But I would tell Eagles fans, like, you can be more optimistic about the offensive line going into this season because Cam Jurgens is less of a question mark, right? You've seen Cam Jurgens now be a Pro Bowl caliber center and going to continue to grow. The left side of the line, prime of their careers. Okay, Lane Johnson's, you want to see him stay healthy, but no signs of slowing down. So I would be more, as we look at the offense overall, I'd be more optimistic about the offense going into this year than I was at this time last year, unless, and it's a big unless, there's a big question mark at tight end going into the offseason. Going into camp.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the depth and the potential in some of the behind the starters is better than it was last year. It's just, can somebody become Mekhi Becton-ish? Maybe Kenyon Green can be, but he had some pretty horrible stats in Houston. So if Jeff Stoutland resurrects that one, then just put that man in Canton next week.
Let's get to the defense right after this break, because the defense is going to be a fun conversation. It is on. And what I mean by that is the Memorial Day sale at ALLCITY. Save $100 off every $1,000 you spend. Plus, get amazing savings on outdoor furniture. That's not all. You get 60 months of special financing, and you have your furniture delivered locally for free. Plus, with your qualifying purchase, you get a free gift. You save on top brand mattresses and get free local delivery, setup, and removal at ALLCITY South Jersey and ALLCITY Philadelphia. Can't beat that. Visit ALLCITYfurniture.com for more information. Financing with approved credit. Minimum purchase required. Some exclusions may apply. See store for details.
And let me tell you about our friends out at Parx Casino. It's right there off of 95 in Bensalem. Easy to get to from everywhere. And there's so much to love about the Parx Casino. They got the Bet Parx app where you can play your favorite in-person casino games like pop culture slots, roulettes, cards, dice games, and more. You can download the Bet Parx app and visit Parx Online Casino. And they've got the games you love, whether you're at home or on the go. And if you do want to go out to Bensalem yourself, you got the Excite Center there. You can go hit up the food court, Chicky and Pete's, the all year round beer garden. So many great choices to get food and drinks at Parx Casino. And you can play said favorite table games as you're waiting for your event at the Excite Center. The Excite Center at Parx Casino is one of the best things about Parx Casino. It's Pennsylvania's #1 casino, and it's so close to Philly, right there off 95 in the PA Turnpike. And the Excite Center is the state-of-the-art entertainment venue inside the casino. I've been there several times. It's great for, comedians, musicians, all sorts of great acts are coming through. It's named one of the best places in the country to see comedians and music headliners. So visit parxcasino.com to buy tickets for all shows, and you can pregame the shows at tons of great places to eat and drink and play some games while you wait. Parx Casino, this is how you win. Must be 21 and older. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Quick question for you, Jamie. This time last week, I was down in D.C. When the Eagles visited the White House. In D.C. in 2 years is going to be the NFL draft.
Yeah,
and that got announced right before we came on air. It's going to look cool visually, like it's going to be right on the mall in D.C. You went to college down there. I used to work in Washington, so I think it's a great spot for the draft. But I'm biased here. I thought the coolest remote draft that I've seen was in Philly. With the art museum as kind of the backdrop, down the parkway are all the fans. Would you want to see that again in Philly?
Absolutely. It's me and my cousin and Addie, my wife. We talk about it. It was one of the most fun weekends in Philly. We were living in the city at the time, so everything was super convenient for us. But we had such a good time. Our plan was only to go one day, and we had such a good time that we ended up running it back the next day. It was awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I got way too excited about the Sidney Jones pick.
Okay.
I was all Sidney Jonesed up that year. It was great. It went off without a hitch. It was beautiful. I'm with you. Like Lambeau Field's a cool backdrop, but they were just like standing in a parking lot. You know what I mean? And it's Pittsburgh next year and then DC the following. It's hard to beat Philly when it comes to that scenic in that area. It's such a beautiful, kind of perfect situation for it. I would love to see the draft come back to Philly.
I agree. And I give the NFL credit for taking it out of New York City. And it's real cool on the road. I thought Nashville was up there when it was on Broadway in Nashville. That was nice. But I just thought the art.
I went out to Chicago too for the Carson Wentz draft. They did a nice job with it too, but it wasn't. Yeah, it was kind of lame.
Yeah, it's better when I think they frankly learned from Philly to not put it in a theater, to put it outside, and so I mean, Bo's gonna roll his eyes when if he watches this he's watching.
He's taking notes on you, Zach. He's not giving you 2 weeks of freedom here.
Yeah, I man's dream, right? I love Washington D.C. and I think it's so cool. Like, you have the Washington Monument in the background. You have on the other side the Lincoln Memorial. Like, that's awesome. But
it's gonna look awesome. Yeah,
it's gonna look awesome. But and this time of year in DC is beautiful. It's right after the cherry blossoms. But Philly is that was such a cool visual and such a great crowd too, that I would urge the NFL to bring it back to Philly.
Yeah, fun story from that weekend. I was hanging out with Freddie Mitchell in one of the VIP booths upstairs. Yeah, big flex. Me and Fred X were hanging draft weekend in one of the VIP tents up front. It was a pretty good time.
We'll save that for a different day. And make sure everyone sticks around, by the way, for overtime, because we'll be talking about the video inside the Eagles draft room. So after the 3:00 buzzer, we'll get to that. Before then, though, let's round out the defense here, and we'll start with the defensive line. And last year, the Eagles had Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Milton Williams, who goes on to be a $25 million a year player, Moro Ojima, Marlon Tuipulotu, and Gabe Hall. And then this year, you're looking at Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Moro Ojima, Ty Robinson, who you mentioned before, the 4th-round pick from Nebraska, who they're real excited about, Thomas Booker, who I should have mentioned in the group before. Thomas Booker made the 53 last year. They have Gabe Hall again. Gabe Hall. Okay, I want to make that clear. Gabe Hall. But the big change here is that Milton Williams isn't back. And that that Jalen Carter's established himself as as a star in the NFL. Ty Robinson's with this group, and Moro Ojima's an emerging player. Did you feel better about the D-line last year or the D-line this year?
I think I felt better about last year. Now, I think Ojimo is a guy that's pretty exciting. He's young as hell. Me and Vinny got to catch up with Coach Washburn before the Super Bowl, and seeing Coach Washburn's excitement talking to Vinny about Ojimo really kind of is seated in the back of my brain. So, I think he's a guy that can emerge into that Milton Williams type of productivity, but it has to be seen. So I think on paper, when you look at last year, you feel better about it because you knew what Milton Williams was and what a big factor he was. On paper, you like the potential of this unit, but you need to see it before you can say it's better. So I think last year's better. This year has possibility. If Ojimo can become what we think he can become, it can become all of a sudden very exciting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a reason why Ojimo was in the thumbnail for this show, because he is going to be a big part of this defensive line. I think obviously the year Jalen Carter had last year, you're expecting him to continue to take off year 3. The Eagles are hoping Jordan Davis develops more into a pass rusher this year, continues to play more. They obviously picked up the 5th-year option. The wild card here is Ojimo, but I would also say Ty Robinson. Ty Robinson is someone who is going to play. I don't want to say more than people think, because I don't know what people think, but
25% of snaps. What are you thinking?
He'll be in the Ojima role from last year, so 25% of the snaps around there. Can play different spots on the line. Thomas Booker's back as a backup nose. We'll see what they add. Byron Young's a player that they liked when they claimed him off waivers last year, and we'll pay attention to his progress. But really, the 2 wild cards here are Moro Ojima and Ty Robinson.
Now, you would know this. Byron Young, was he the one there was 2 Byron Youngs drafted in the same year, like 7 picks apart?
Yeah.
He was the
Alabama one, not the Tennessee one.
Yeah. Okay.
He went to the Raiders, and the Byron Young who went to the Rams has been a more productive.
He's a good player. Shame we couldn't have that Byron.
That's probably the Byron Young.
Yeah, I think he's got like 15 and a half sacks over his first 2 years, and the other one was released. So,
but that's how he ended up with the Eagles. So you look at the edge rushers, and I mean, it's hard not to be more optimistic about the group going into last year, because at this time last year, you thought Bryce Huff was going to be a major difference. I mean, the Eagles paid him more than Saquon Barkley. They made him a $17 million a year player.
Crazy.
But they had Josh Sweat, Bryce Huff, Now, Nolan Smith, you didn't feel as good about last year as you do this year. Brandon
Sure.
Graham, and then Alex Hunt was an unknown in that group a year ago. And they had guys like Julian Okwara, as kind of their rolling the dice lottery ticket types. This year, you look at it, Nolan Smith is now at the top of that group. Then Alex Hunt, Azeez Ojulari, Josh Uche, Antoine Powell-Ryland, Patrick Johnson. But you don't have, Josh Sweat was a Pro Bowl player, right? Bryce Huff was a double-digit sack player who the Eagles were paying $17 million to. Nolan Smith was an ascending first-round pick a year ago. So it's a different type of group. How would you assess the edge rushers May 5th this year compared to May 5th last year?
I mean, I think May 5th last year clearly wins. Jalen Carter, it'll be determined how much he's going to get better. I assume how much more ceiling is there to get to. TBD. Nolan Smith, you got to love the opportunity he has here to kind of cement himself as one of those kind of tier one, as Fran Duffy breaks him down, the tier one type of tight ends where he could make some serious money in this league with a big year. Not Ojimo, but Uche is one that, like, can he be a reclamation project here? Can he find that ability to emerge? Almost like the anti-Huff, where it's the scrap heap, hopefully turning into a good player as opposed to a good player turning into a scrap heap player here. We'll see. There's some opportunities for these guys to win jobs, to emerge, but I think Alex Hunt is the big X factor here. If he shows you some of those flashes he showed you last year on a consistent basis, we could revisit this conversation 9 months from now and be like, oh man, this year was actually better. But it's clearly last year's group. Josh Sweat, it was a really good player. I was always a big Josh Sweat fan. So they have their work cut out for them, but I think there's potential there in that group.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And Josh Sweat provided a high baseline. You thought Bryce Huff was going to give them, a percentage of what Hassan Reddick did, a decent percentage, and that obviously didn't happen. And then you weren't as optimistic about Nolan Smith or Alex Hunt going into last year. Now you have more optimism about Smith and Hunt, but you don't have kind of that high floor player.
Sure.
That Smith provided. And then even the upside that Huff provided, you're not getting that from Ojulari going into the year, but Ojulari is going to be more productive for the Eagles this year than Huff was for the Eagles last year. I'm confident, with the way that turned out. It's crazy to think that. Josh Uche is a wild card. He's a lottery ticket. I know there's some excitement about Powell-Ryland. Was a big sack producer at Vatech, but it's clear we thought edge rusher was a strength going into last year with Sweat and Huff, and then Nolan Smith and Brandon Graham as the next in that group. And this year, you're hoping with Hunt as a starter. I mean, you're hoping Ojulari becomes more of a player. So, I think it's fair to say edge rusher had more optimism about a year ago.
Now, what are your thoughts on Bryce Huff? Is he here? Can he be saved? What's your gut tell you right now on Cinco de Mayo?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'm looking at it like James Bradbury a year ago. If I was doing my 53 last year with James Bradbury, I'm like, I don't think he's going to be on it. I think the Eagles will eat the money. And right now, with where they are with Huff, I think they'll try to kind of figure this out. And they'll give him a chance to make the team. If they have to package him in a deal, they will. I don't think they're going into this year relying on Bryce Huff being a major part of the pass rush. And if he turns into that, it's great for them. But I just don't think that's what their expectations are going into the year. Now, at linebacker, this was a big question a year ago. Huge question a year ago.
Sure.
We had this conversation a year ago. We would have said Devin White and Nakobe Dean are the top two. We would have said Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is pushing for playing time. And we would have thought Zack Baun was just a special teams guy who's going to help in multiple roles. And Oren Burks is a roster hopeful, right? Now you look at it this year, and Zack Baun is one of the best linebackers in the NFL. Jihad Campbell is a first-round pick, right? Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is a backup, and you feel good about that. Smile Mondin, backup, you feel good about like the athletic ability that he brings. And that's not even mentioning Nakobe Dean, who proved that he was a starting caliber player, but is obviously recovering from a significant injury here.
Do we know an actual timeline on him? Or are we expecting maybe November, December? Like
no, earlier than that. Now he's
earlier?
saying
Okay.
every time I've spoken to him about it, he said earlier than you're asking, but we'll see. I mean, I'm thinking like a month into the year. I'm thinking probably October, but
Okay.
I don't have a clear. He's optimistic.
Everybody's different. Yeah.
Exactly. As it approaches, we'll see. But it's clear that we feel better about this group going into this year than last year. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. We have an all-pro linebacker. We haven't been able to say that in a long time here in Philadelphia. So that's really exciting. Obviously, that's better. Jihad Campbell, I mean, it's 1979, Jerry Robinson. You haven't had that type of investment forever. So I think it's, Fran's snuffing out what's right there. He's going to play linebacker until he doesn't have to. Maybe getting a Kobe Dean extended on a cheap kind of prove it type of deal for the future. And Baun and Dean can be linebackers next year when we're doing the show a year from now. And Jihad Campbell's in that defensive edge group. Yeah. We'll see what happens. But I think you feel great about it with Nakobe. I think Trotter Jr. is a guy that is a depth guy in the NFL. I mean, if he gets the opportunity to start somewhere, it could happen. I can't rule it out, but I think you feel good about his depth there. So I think, yeah, absolutely. This is a group you feel better about. And then Smile, am I saying that right? Smile?
Yeah, Smile,
okay.
The opposite of Frown. Yep.
Yeah. Smile, I think, again, we'll talk about it in the Howie breakdown, but he's a guy, when you start and play as much as he did at a program like Georgia, you wonder why somebody slips that far in the draft. But internally in that draft room, they seemed excited about his potential. And I'm sure they're excited about every draft pick they make when they make it. But I think there's serious depth in the linebacker room now, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and this is also why this exercise is intriguing, because it shows you how little you know on May 5th, right?
Yeah.
Linebacker's a perfect example. Like we said earlier, you would have thought Devin White was a top linebacker for them last year. You would have thought Zack Baun was more of a depth special teams guy, and that's why – like we see it with our own eyes. The film doesn't lie. The on-field reps don't lie during training camp. We'll have a better idea of all these positions. Edge rusher, like the questions we have, we'll have a better idea of that. The O-line will have a better idea of that. And linebacker last year is a great example of that. It became pretty clear that Devin White wasn't going to be the starter and that Zack Baun was the clear top guy.
I mean, he didn't even fly to Brazil with you. We were like, oh, man, this is over, huh?
Yeah, think of all the Caprianas he could have had, or Caprianas. You're looking for a good Cinco de Mayo drink. You pound those backs. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I just saw the comment, Zach. We're a linebacker factory now. This is nice.
You know what? If Howie Roseman if he wanted to have a good sense of humor on draft day, he should say we're just building a linebacker factory. That is true. And I don't mean to gloss it over. The Nakobe Dean of this is going to be an interesting thing to watch, because if you put him in the group, I do think Jihad Campbell plays more edge. And I think you see him more on the edge on third downs in particular. I've had so many people ask me this, and I say, obviously he's an off-ball linebacker. Like, that's what they drafted him to be. Well, I think the ultimate determination is, where does he play on third downs? Where does he play on those money downs? If he's going forward on money downs toward the quarterback, then to me, they drafted him for his ability to affect the quarterback. If he's dropping in the coverage on third downs, then he's an off-ball linebacker. Like if he's doing run fits on first down, yeah, that's what I'm expecting, right? But to me, in money downs, what is it on those money downs? What is he doing? And if he's rushing the quarterback, then to me, he's more of the edge rusher. So we'll see how that transpires. And we were going to talk about the secondary, and we were going to talk about the outstanding work that the Eagles production crew did, giving us behind the scenes of the draft, of the Jihad Campbell pick, of the Smile Mondon pick in overtime.
What
I gotta say, I've been hosting now for a week and a half, and that's the first time that I got the overtime on time, I believe.
Golf
Yeah.
clap.
Next time, Vince, next time you do my performance review, make sure you get the overtime in there. So let's knock out the secondary here quickly because I do want to talk about Howie. Cornerbacks. Last year you had Slay. Quinyon Mitchell was the first round pick. Keely Ringo entering year 2. Cooper DeJean as your second round pick. You didn't know about Mitchell and DeJean then, but you obviously knew about Slay, Eli Ricks, Avonte Maddox, and they had Bradbury in the mix as well. This year, you don't have the same veterans that you had last year, but you have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. You feel strongly about that combination. Keely Ringo entering year 3. Adoree Jackson gives them the veteran stability, if you will. Mac McWilliams, a 5th-round pick. Eli Ricks entering year 3. This is an intriguing one. Did you feel better about it last year with more of the known entity in Darius Slay, or with the upside that these year 2, year 3 players give you this year?
Yeah, it's hard because Cooper and Quinyon obviously became probably better than we all thought they would be. And I think we all thought they were going to be something good, but to be immediately as good as Quinyon was such a pleasant surprise. Losing Slay is real. I've been a big Slay fan. I think he got over criticized a little bit here during his time. I thought he was excellent last year. So I think it's tough to evaluate. Keely Ringo, we know he's younger than a lot of guys, right, Zach? How many guys is he younger than on the roster?
He is younger than Quinyon Mitchell. That counts, even though it's in overtime. That counts. The streak stays alive.
Well done. Right. Thank you. Yeah, so he's the unknown because if he's going to be slotted into that starting spot, he's not as good as Darius Slay. Is Quinyon Mitchell going to get better? Is he going to get tested more this year? Cooper DeJean had a phenomenal year. So it's hard for me to say that they're better. I think there's the capability of them being better, but losing Slay is a big loss. That veteran kind of stability, you knew what you were getting. You knew what you were counting on. Keely Ringo is not going to be as good, most likely, as Darius Slay was last year. You feel pretty solid about the depth, but it's hard for me to say that they're better. But they can be? Question mark?
I think they have more upside this year. And I agree. Like if you're just going, all right, what do are you going to sleep easy at night with last year's group or this year's group? Last year, you just had more known entities, right? You knew Darius Slay was a 12-year pro. He gives you that stability there. But I mean it that I just like the upside of this group. Maybe I'm in the tank for Keely Ringo. We'll see. Cooper DeJean. I think DeJean, the inside-outside versatility, I think you'll see him more on the outside, maybe in some base situations this year than you saw a year ago. Mac McWilliams, I've watched more film on him during the past week. I'm trusting Fran's eval there. I think Adoree Jackson gives them a solid, veteran cornerback 4. So I would lean probably more toward this year because I'm expecting gains from Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. I think now, as I said, progress is not linear. So you've seen guys have great rookie years and take a step back. You see injuries sometimes come up. But to me, last year is the baseline for Cooper DeJean in particular, because Cooper DeJean didn't get into the lineup until late in the training camp. And he was still trying to find his feet mid-season. I felt like. So I am I'm feeling better about Cooper DeJean going into this year than last year. Quinyon Mitchell proved himself as a good starter, and I think he has the chance to be a great starter. So I might give a slight edge to the corners this year, and that's no knock on Slay. But I think where you have the most concern of any position going into this year compared to last year is safety. And I say that because a big conversation when we had this on Cinco de Mayo last year, we were saying, all right, they got CJ Gardner-Johnson. He's back. You feel good about this group. CJ Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown, right? Avonte Maddox can slide over to safety if you need him to. Now you're looking at it. You have Reed Blankenship, and then what? Andrew Makuba, or I should say Drew Makuba, 2nd-round pick, but unknown. Sidney Brown didn't have the year 2 that the Eagles wanted. Tristan McCollum, Lewis Seen, who was on a practice squad last year. So this is the spot where if you're saying, all right, where are you concerned about the roster this year compared to last year? Safety is what jumps out.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to get used to calling him Drew Makuba. They seem excited about him, and he's certainly going to have an opportunity to go out there and win a starting job. Sidney Brown hasn't taken the reins yet and really forced their hand in any decision making. McCollum showed you some great flashes in preseason. Looked serviceable when he, was thrown into the mix at times last year. But I think you're absolutely right. I think this is the position you look at and you go, outside of maybe right guard, and there's probably some, I don't know if you call it more proven options there, but here's where you really need somebody. At least with that, you have surrounding pieces next to them that you feel great about. If Reed Blankenship was to go down with an injury, knock on wood, all of a sudden you're looking at your safeties like, oh no, you really need Drew Makuba at that point to step up and be competent. So I think this is an easy one. I think last year's depth chart was a lot better of a feeling than this year's depth chart. That being said, if Drew Makuba can play, he's got a job for him for the taking, because I don't think it's going to be hard to beat out Sidney Brown at this point. So we'll see. Yeah.
And so then the overall takeaway here is I personally feel better about this Eagles roster going into OTAs this year than I felt last year. I think that the internal improvement from guys who are coming back is a big part of this.
Sure.
There are guys who prove themselves, but I think the value of this exercise is that the questions we had on the roster last year, right guard, linebacker, for instance, those were answered in a big way and in a positive way. And if that happens this year at safety, if that happens this year at edge rusher, the Eagles are in a good spot. If it doesn't happen, if those questions aren't answered, then the Eagles have vulnerabilities. If right guard's not answered, then they have vulnerabilities. And that's kind of going to be the big story here throughout minicamp, throughout OTA or throughout OTAs and training camp. But I would say the Eagles fans who are concerned about the roster, use this, or concerned about the Eagles, quote unquote, getting worse, just look at this exercise. I mean, I would feel better about this team going into this year than I felt about them last year when they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if Jalix Hunt can step up, if Ojimo can step up, and then those cornerbacks can get better, I think you're absolutely right. You can start to feel better about this roster. You know me, Quignon's perfect. He's only going to get more perfect. So, yeah, I mean, I hope you're right. I think Jalix Hunt, Keely Ringo, and Ojimo are the three that you need to be pretty damn good. And if that happens, which is totally realistic, yeah, you can start to feel real good about this roster. It's just some positions, maybe the depth isn't as good. But if these guys emerge into what we think they can become, then you're in good shape.
Now, the audience has waited 68 minutes for the main event here. And that is Jamie and I watched the outstanding work the Eagles production crew did behind the scenes of the draft. It's always good getting that type of footage. I spoke to skeptics who say, oh, well, it's edited. You don't know. Look, it is still raw footage. Like you're still getting what they say in that moment. They're not playing for the cameras. Like those cameras are on Howie when he's on the phone, right? And so this is what's happening. Okay. So I bring that up as a way of saying I have my thoughts, but I'm curious your notes, because sometimes I could be a little too close to it. Like I know all the characters involved, and I think it's good to kind of get, I mean, not to say that you don't, but like to kind of get more of the fan perspective on what you were able to watch.
Yeah, I think my first observation I jotted down was they made calls with the Chargers, Packers, Ravens, and Commanders to try and move up. Yeah. The access they give you is so cool, because like I wish I could have seen Andy Reid in the war room back in the day, trying to move up and get guys they liked. So it's clear. I think Jahad Campbell was obviously the guy they were trying to get, regardless of where they were going. And it's funny to see them making the calls, and then later in the video seeing Howie kind of smirk when Atlanta makes their trade up. And goes, oh, well, now I understand why nobody's taking our offers. It was a very funny way of saying, nice overpay, Falcons, you idiots. Yeah. So, but I do think it's an apt observation by Howie that they wanted to move up, and he was being shrewd, as he should be, and nobody was taking it. I think it's a little bit of a credit to him in that you know who's calling you, and you know how they handle their business, and people were going like, "No, there's dumber GMs out there that will try to take advantage of." So the first thing was just I was amazed how many calls they were making to try and move up there from 32.
Yeah, and it was clear that 64 was in play with the Chargers conversations, which got pretty deep. I don't know what they were going to get back, if they were going to get the Chargers third round pick back. But that's a big pivot point there. And by the way, that means Howie was pretty lucky, because if you give up 64 to get Jahad Campbell, it changes a lot in the draft. So now if they got the third round pick back, maybe Makuba's on the board in the third round. But the bottom line is that they got fortunate there. I've seen some online speculation that Jahad Campbell wasn't the target. Now, I can't tell you definitively they were calling the Chargers to take Jahad Campbell at 22 there, but it's pretty clear that they're moving up to try to get Campbell as opposed to like Malachi Starks, because after Starks was off the board, they were still trying to trade up. Like they tried with Washington. Adam Peters said there was an in-division tax, right?
Which is pretty funny.
Yeah. You saw, by the way, Josh Connerly was a player I liked in the draft. The Eagles clearly.
I wrote that down. That was cool to see.
Yeah.
He goes, "Oh, that's a good pick."
Yeah. Connerly's a guy to. I mean, he's 21 years old. So that those negotiations day one were strong, but it was strong footage. But it was cool seeing the behind the scenes that they clearly were trying to move up for Campbell, and then also like the smile on Vic Fangio's face.
Oh yeah.
When Vic Fangio came in the room and Howie said he got him Campbell,
he smiled. It happened.
Smile like that, like more than the Super Bowl, like that. I got you this linebacker you can be creative with. Yeah, that was pretty neat to see.
Yeah, the other notes I have written down, Alec Hallaby, I thought he was I don't think he was BSing. I think he was genuinely excited about the Makuba pick. He said this is a guy that we targeted all along in the process. He's got all the intangibles we like. He's a hard worker. We like his versatility for the position, not only in his ball hawking ability, but in his physicality. So I thought Alec Hallaby talking about Makuba there was a pretty cool little insight too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it's like, by definition, when you draft someone, you're higher on him than the rest of the league, right? Yeah. But the Eagles made Makuba the third safety. I didn't expect him to be the third safety off the board. And I thought there was a clear top two, and then there was ambiguity among who was, 3 to 7 or 3 to 8. And so it was clear they viewed him as 3, or if not higher, but let's say 3 for the sake of conversation. And I thought maybe a bit overdrafted at 64, but this is an example of if they have conviction, and they clearly had conviction on Drew Makuba, you'd rather be a few picks early than a pick late, because if you're pick late, you don't get the guy. So I can understand it there.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool little insight. And then the last kind of note I made there was I didn't know about the Saturday morning kind of like hype sesh.
Oh, the passion meeting. Yes.
Yeah, the passion meeting I thought was very cool. Now, obviously, that part was edited. Obviously, each guy probably went on for a couple players. But to hear the scouts and these executives talk about the guys they like and why they were raving about Miles Hinton in it. They think he has starter potential down the line. Just need to work with him. To hear the Drew Kendall talk was very cool. To hear I think the one that wasn't touched on was Mac McWilliams, but obviously they liked him.
Yeah.
It was very cool to hear the room go around and talk about the guys that they fell in love with and that they wanted. So to see that kind of, camaraderie and workmanship amongst the room, I thought was pretty neat.
Real quick before I respond, I just want to give some breaking news to anyone who's still watching here. Or I shouldn't say anyone who's still watching. You're all still watching. Britton Covey is signing with the LA Rams on a 1-year deal. So Britton Covey, that goodbye last night was because he signed with the LA Rams today. So something to watch when the Eagles play the Rams. The passion.
Is his wife gonna wear him as a backpack and put out a congratulations video?
Did that happen before?
Yeah, I think on his birthday, he jumped on her back. If I jumped on my wife's back, she's going down and needing a trip to the hospital, you know?
You see, I'll say this. I didn't know about that. You didn't know about the passion meeting. We're teaching each other some different things today. Yeah. So the passion meeting is something that I've spoken to Howie about extensively in the past. And it's something that, they feel strongly about it going into day 3. And the reason behind, they say day 1 and day 2, you're serving different constituencies, right? There's a lot of different people involved. Day 3 is really a scout day. And so Howie's point has always been like, if there's someone who you feel strongly about, don't tell me tomorrow morning, right? Tell me right now.
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Exactly. And so that's what it does. And now clearly there were more players who come up than what they mentioned.
Sure.
But the reason why this is important is because if you look at the footage last year, Alan Walking pounded the table for Johnny Wilson, right? Like talk about how unique Johnny Wilson was. They went, there were different people who stood up for different players that they ended up taking in those meetings. And so you just see like the way, they're talking about Ty Williams or the way, Miles Hinton was the one that really jumped out to me, right? Because, Miles Hinton's someone who there was some ambiguity about going into this. He might not have had his best film when he was with Michigan, especially 2 years ago. But, you saw, for instance, Phil Baya, the director of player personnel, stump for Miles Hinton. You saw Jeff Stoutland's face when they took Miles Hinton. It was Lee DeValerio, the Southeast area scout who scouts the SEC, who said Smile Mondin was the best guy on his board at that point. It was interesting hearing Dave Caldwell talk about Kyle McCord, especially because, look, we don't know if the Eagles were going to take Shedeur Sanders there. The Eagles are pretty mum about it. There's people saying no. Clearly, Cleveland wanted to jump in front of the Eagles. But it's clear in that meeting that Kyle McCord, they went into the day with people saying he was the best available quarterback on that day, right? And when you heard Zach Drapkin talk about, the efficiency stats that he had at Syracuse, that jumps out a lot. And so, there were a few guys, like we didn't see Cam Williams discussion. We did not see Mac McWilliams discussion. But I thought it was pretty revealing, the behind the scenes. And I'd love the more the Eagles put that out. It's helpful for us. It's helpful for the public.
Yeah, I think it's the unscripted series in general, whether it's on the field, and I'm going to miss hearing BG mic'd up on future unscripteds. But that type of access is like the stuff as a fan you dream of, because you always want to know what that war room is like, to see guys kind of pounding the table a little bit for their guys, and to see how he obviously trusts them and say, like, come on, let me know who you got. I think it's a really cool process. That was a cool insight into the draft war room. And then to see Laurie's, role in it, and Sirianni kind of with his feet up at times, wearing a hoodie, not really participating. I think Howie came over to him with the one trade, and Nick goes, "Oh, that's a good deal."
Yeah.
It was just a cool process, and it's very cool stuff.
Yeah. My one piece of advice is, get the PHLY Eagles show on the second screen there. They have the NBA playoffs there. Yeah, get the PHLY Eagles show on there. Let's do that.
Seriously. And I guess one other observation I had was I didn't realize how like tied into the broadcast they were, because it appears they're just watching they're getting the news kind of a little bit ahead, but to see them like watching like we all do is pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're watching the announcements there, but you also see based on the timing, like they're like 4 picks ahead. Calling the player up. Yeah. But no, that is though. Yeah. And then they have the NBA final, or I'm sorry, not the NBA playoffs on in the back. Sirianni's probably watching. Real quick super chat from Polar Jam. Always appreciate your contributions, Polar Jam. ZB finally nails overtime, just as Bo. Life is cruel. Yeah, Polar Jam, I appreciate that. I mean, I got to tell you, the notes that I've kept on the hosting from the past 2 weeks here, I'm trying, I mean it when I close the shows out saying we'll be better tomorrow. So, I had to get that in. So I appreciate that. The sign,
you nailed it.
The sign of a good show is when you budget for an hour and you're an hour and 20 minutes in, you still got good things to talk about. So, Jamie, this has been fun.
Indeed.
I appreciate you. I always appreciate you stepping in. You're a big part of the show. Julia, as always, the best head of production in the game. We will be back tomorrow with Fran Duffy doing player comps. Okay, so Fran and I are going to be in studio, and Fran is he's grinding film right now on 2026 players, but he's going to go through the 2025 players and find the NFL comps for each of those guys. So make sure you tune in tomorrow, 2 p.m. For Eagles draft pick player comps. Tomorrow night, look, you can't sign up anymore. It's sold out already, but Fran's going to be breaking down film for the diehards. And then we got some exciting shows in the bank for our exciting shows ready to go for the rest of the week. So make sure 2 o'clock every day you're watching the PHLY Eagles show. Until tomorrow, that's Jamie Lynch. Thank you to Julia. If Bo was here, he would say, as always, we love you. I will say we'll be better tomorrow. Thank you for watching.
See ya.
We all silly like the mayor.